And we're live. Dr. Kris, how are you, man?
I'm good, Steve. How are you today?
I'm well. I missed you. Been a while since we hooked up here. This is season 5, episode 10. That's a lot of episodes.
Man, we're have to hang in there and beat like Peaky Blinders or something, you know?
Right. I enjoyed that show.
Oh, so good. They're supposed to be making a movie, so hopefully they will.
Oh, cool. All right. So today, we haven't talked in a while, but we always like to talk about how to take control of your health and et cetera. We're going to talk about metabolism today, I believe. And so I'm going to roll an intro and then we'll get on to talking about your new metabolism program. How's that? All right.
Sounds great.
And here they go, like the pros they are. If you're like most folks Dr. Kris Foosterhausen works with, you're active, you want to take ownership of your health, and you want to age gracefully. The problem is there is so much conflicting information out there about health and wellness, it's tough to know who to trust. Most providers are limited by what insurance will approve, so it can seem like they're only able to help you manage your health decline with more meds. On the Dr. Kris Life Podcast, you'll learn how you can regain your confidence in your health journey. You'll learn helpful knowledge about programs, supplements, peptides, and hormones that Dr. Kris has used with thousands of patients just like you to help them crush their goals and be their best selves. So if you're ready to take charge of your health and are wanting to stay active and healthy so you can be a better parent, partner, or lover, then you're in the right place. Welcome to the Dr. Kris Podcast. Hey, we did it. Look at us. Like we haven't missed a beat.
Seamless.
All right.
Those people are still in the bathtub too.
Yep. Still in the robes with the water.
They should be very not clean at this point. There's no water in the bathtub, but okay.
Your hairline's looking good. Looks like things are moving along.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, I need a haircut. Yeah, as you took it as a shot, I said, "Man, I need a haircut." I wasn't taking a shot at you, so. But I realized you see yourself on camera, you're like, "Damn, looking kind of shaggy today." But anyway.
All right, we're broadcasting on Facebook, YouTube, and more out there. All right, so online weight loss versus physician-guided success, finding what works for you. You have a new program, your metabolism program. Tell us a little bit about it, Dr. Kris.
Well, so, some of the things that we've been up to lately outside of work is that, we had an amazing, we've partnered with New BioAge, and I was lucky enough to get announced as on their scientific team last week. And we had, I guess a week and a half ago, and we had an amazing conference that we call CALM, Clinical Aspects of Longevity Medicine. And I was lucky enough to lead off day 2. And I think my lecture was very well received. And we talked about, many things that relate to metabolism and how, I think that where I would probably start this conversation is that there are now so many options for patients. Since you and I started talking about metabolism, and we try to stay away necessarily from the word weight loss, we like the word metabolism much better because sometimes we don't necessarily need to lose weight. There are patients out there that I would use the term skinny fat with, that they maybe necessarily don't need to see the scale change. They need to see their body composition change. And I think that that's one thing that we try to get through our patients is let's not just focus on the number on the scale. Let's focus on the metrics that we can learn from, like an in-body scan. But with much more competition, I guess I would say, out there, the online industry, gosh, I don't know if you saw this during the Super Bowl, like there was actually an online weight loss commercial, and I think someone said they paid $30 million for like a 1-minute ad during the Super Bowl. So obviously they're making some money, right, to be able to afford a Super Bowl ad. But I think there's some real deficiencies in some of these online programs that we can kind of get into. I'm not here to say that online programs are necessarily bad. I just don't think that they completely compete with what practitioners like myself are doing in our clinics. And so that's where we just really try to focus in on metabolism. We're trying to work away from that term weight loss and work towards metabolism, because it's not just peptides that we can use. And in this conversation, usually the peptides that are discussed are GLP-1s, but there's also small molecules and medications and supplements that we use in addition to these things to get these ultimate effects, because every patient is not exactly the same. And we must make sure that we tailor that, because the one thing I would say that I know for most online programs is they are very protocoled. Basically, every patient is getting the same exact treatment. And I'm sure we'll cover it a little more, but most of the time you never actually really interact with a physician, a provider. Most of the time it's just screeners. Like, you get these little texted screeners to you, and as long as you don't answer yes to anything, they approve you, and a peptide shows up in the mail. And again, yes, I will give you, they're less expensive. Those programs are less expensive, but they're less expensive for a reason.
Yeah, and imagine a lot of it's AI influenced. So you're probably not even talking to a real physician. You're talking to an AI agent.
Yeah. My understanding of how they work is it's exactly right. It's AI driven questionnaires. Mm-hmm. And as long as you don't answer incorrectly to something, basically you've already been approved to then proceed to the next level, and it's all AI. The only time an actual provider gets involved is if you check the wrong box, and maybe there's a contraindication or something like that, that then an actual provider has to get on with you and get on the call with you or whatever. And so again, there's a program for everybody, but for that person looking for the much more in-depth science-based program, that's really what we try to do.
Yeah, and I think your patients would, your patients want to take responsibility for their part of the relationship. So they're wanting to impact their lifestyle. They're not wanting for just, hey, just give me something that I can just inject or take a pill and that's it. I don't have to think about it, and I do everything the same. That's not what you're looking for. And that's not the folks that do well with you, correct?
Yeah. And so, I get asked this question because, as you know, and as some of my patients know, I do a lot of educating of doctors, NPs, PAs, nurses. GLP-1s is not the weight loss program. It's a piece of the weight loss program. As I always say, think of it like a toolbox. If I'm a mechanic, I'm not going to show up at work with just a pair of pliers, right? Like, I'm going to need multiple tools to fix whatever it is I'm trying to repair. Sometimes you might be able to make a crescent wrench do the job and fix the problem, but most of the time you're going to need a socket and a ratchet and a screwdriver. And that's the easiest way I can explain a proper longevity / metabolism program is we need more than just a GLP-1. Is it part of our program? Absolutely. And is it a big player? Absolutely. But it's knowing how to combine these different substances, medications, supplements, knowing how to combine them, knowing how to choose what's right for a patient, talking to a patient. I still think there's something to physically sitting with a provider and having that interaction, being held accountable. How accountable are you to an AI questionnaire? I mean, you're not accountable to that. And I hate to say it, they make it so cheap because they're buying in such bulk, that we can't compete with, that they buy in these huge bulks. And they're able to do these things super cheap because you probably have one provider managing hundreds of patients because it's all AI driven. It's one of the pros and cons of AI these days. You can streamline things so much that these patients aren't really getting the one-on-one care that they need to actually truly have success. And I would say that I would bet if there's studies done that there's just as many failures on these online programs as there are success stories, and then it kind of gives the peptide a bad name, right? Like, oh, I did that. I did it for 6 months. Like, I had a patient the other day came in. He came in and he said, hey, I see you do GLP-1s. And I'm like, yeah, we have programs for that. And he goes, I also noticed you're a little more expensive than the person I'm going to. And I was like, yeah, I'm not surprised. And he goes, oh, why do you say you're not surprised? I said, because, I have a lot of education and I spend a lot of time with my patients and what we do works. And, we charge appropriately, we believe, for what we do. And he goes, oh, well, I think I'll stick with who I'm with. And I said, that's fine. I said, if I could ask, how long you been on a program? He said, 6 months. I said, how many pounds have you lost? By the way, guy's pretty overweight. He said 6 pounds. And I said, so how's that working out for you? And I wasn't being sarcastic. He goes, well, I'm not having much success. And I'm like, well, I mean, and he ultimately made the appointment and actually came in, because then it kind of dawned on him like, yeah, I'm saving $50 or whatever, but is that really worth it at the end of the day? And so, it's just depending on how the patient wants to look at it. We're not really looking for that patient that's looking for the quickest route to get to the point. We're looking for the person that looks at us as part of their long-term medical future. That, again, we like to use the terms metabolism. We're really moving towards the term longevity now, which is living longer and healthier, not just living longer, and really concentrating more on those as this industry evolves. I just had a long conversation with Leonard this morning, who, has been on our podcast before, about this exact thing, about how this is where the future is for providers like me, is to really pivot to this longevity model.
Yeah. So the folks that this AI stuff works, they're looking for a one size fits all. They're still in that old frame of the medical system, but this is more responsibility. It's more comprehensive. You have several things going on here. I noticed in your program, it's talking about hydration, protein, fats, carbs. There's a lot of education here that helps you start to look at various aspects of what you're doing that could be pulling the rug out from under you, even if you are taking Ozempic or whatever it's called.
Yeah, so let's take that one simple thing. Like, I have a slide that I show in my lectures, and I many times show it to my patients about the long-term benefits on our body of GLP-1s. But let's take the brain, for example. So of course, it lowers our appetite, so we eat less, right? But believe it or not, it improves memory and learning. So we're actually smarter on GLP-1s than we are not on GLP-1s. But do you know one, and it decreases apoptosis in the brain. It has a neuroprotective effect on the brain. One of the newest breakthroughs in Alzheimer's disease is using GLP-1s in dementia patients. And you and I have talked about that on previous podcasts. But guess one thing that it does? It lowers our thirst. So we already, as Americans, don't drink enough water. I mean, it's just natural. Most of us walk around somewhat dehydrated on a daily basis. I always say if your mouth is dry, you're definitely dehydrated. You're already past dehydration. You're pretty, moderately. I always say the first way to look is your urine color. If your urine is not clear, you're dehydrated. So many providers don't discuss this, that, hey, we already don't drink enough water. Now we're taking a peptide that makes us not want to drink as much water. Now we're even more dehydrated. Guess what effect that has on metabolism? It has a negative effect on our metabolism. Hydration is super, super important. So what are some things we can do for that? Just easy free tips. I love Stanley cups. Everybody's got one these days, a big cup with a handle on it. Well, you can know that, hey, you can go into your day just saying, okay, I'm just going to drink more water today. But if you're not measuring it, how do you really know? And so that's why I like, Stanley cups. Like, hey, I need to drink 3 of these today. 1 in the morning, 1 in the afternoon, 1 in the early evening. There's a great product we have called iCell. So like if you're a person that says, I just don't like that much water. Well, okay, iCell is a very specific creatine and amino acid blend that you can put into your water that basically forces your cells to absorb that water. So basically we take half the amount of water and we hydrate twice as much. So if you're just truly that patient that doesn't like to drink water, then I'm like, okay, let's mix a little iCell powder in our water, and now we can get away with less water a day. So there's ways around it, but these are the kind of topics that we discuss in our visits, making sure that we really, truly understand all the best practices of getting healthy. And then like online, let's talk about, I think maybe the most important thing you're missing, and that is your scan. Like you're not even scanning. They're basically saying, Steve, what does your scale say? And you're like, well, I weighed 190, now I weigh 187. Well, again, as you and I've talked about, what does that mean? I could have lost 3 good pounds. I could have lost 3 pounds of muscle in that scenario, or I could have lost, I could have gained fat and lost muscle and lost a net 3 pounds, but yet I'm actually fatter today than I was 3 pounds ago. That happened with me recently. I actually I've been trying a new peptide out on myself, and I actually lost 6 pounds, but my body fat went up because I lost muscle in the deal. And I would say, well, that's not a good trade-off. So if you're not scanning and being held accountable to these scans with things like the InBody scan, which is a, $15,000-$16,000 machine that you come in and scan on that gives us an accurate indication of where your body composition is. I just don't think that's going to be as effective as these online programs, for the most part. So, again, there's always going to be people that online works well for them, but we're just trying to show them like how our program is more in depth, how we give nutritional counseling, how now we exercise test you. We put you on the Pinoe and on the treadmill and Pinoe test you so we can send you home with an exact exercise program because I think there's nothing worse than exercising incorrectly. Like, it takes a lot of effort to get to the gym, right? I always say there are people out there that genuinely love the gym. I don't know that I'm that person. I enjoy it, but I don't love it. Do you love it, Steve, or do you?
No.
Yeah.
So
I know all the benefits of it, but I always say it's ignorance. So it's not stupidity, but if you go to the gym and you actually incorrectly work out for an hour, that kind of sucks. Like, what if these days, if I could actually tell you exactly what you need to go do for what your goals are at the gym so that you do check the box correctly. I had a patient today. He's like, oh my gosh, I'm doing cardio. And he told me how he was doing it and he's trying to lose fat. And I said, man, I'm not trying to be that guy, but I'm going to be that guy when I tell you what you're doing's wrong. And he's like, but my trainer said, and I said, I get it. I'm not trying to get into a battle with your trainer, but I'm telling you, your trainer's telling you wrong. And you're not burning the most effective fat that you can burn the way you're doing it. And guess what? The way I'm going to tell you is easier than what they're doing with you. So, there's just ways today that we can be so efficient in what we do and how we get into shape and how we keep you in shape. There is no quick fix. That thought needs to leave people's brains, that there's this quick injection that you can just take and you're all better. Obesity is still on the rise despite all these cool GLP-1s. We're not getting skinnier, but GLP-1s are amazing. Please don't take my comment wrong. Anybody that's ever heard me lecture know I love GLP-1s, but they're not the sole answer to this. We must mix it all together. Like, you don't go make a cake with flour. You must mix in some ingredients. And so, that's what we always say is like, yeah, it might be our main ingredient, but there's a whole lot of other ingredients to make that carrot cake,
Seems like that GLP-1 is more, it kind of buys you time for your brain and your expectations to kind of reset while the other things that you're doing, the other actions, whether it's hydration or eating better fats or looking at carbs the correct way, it gives your brain time to let your lifestyle catch up. To make, this is a big change when you decide, all right, I'm going to take control and we're going to use these diagnostic tests to measure our change instead of just guessing. And I think that's huge. And that GLP-1 is just helping your brain kind of catch up to the other changes that take a lot longer to set in. They're like new habits or new lifestyle.
Yeah. So actually I would very much agree with what you just said, and I'll take it another step. It's actually retraining the brain. Okay. Mm-hmm. So it's actually, we're not naturally born and go craving bad foods. Okay. We actually learn this through time. And that's where that learning and memory improves. It actually, GLP-1s, when used properly, will take away the food noise, the things that pull you to the pantry to go grab a ho-ho or a Twinkie. And if we can make that food noise calm down, then it becomes very easy easy to make good choices. As I've said on this podcast many times, what is the average way an American tries to lose weight? They decide on Sunday they're going to eat better on Monday. They gorge on Sunday, and then Monday they try to eat rice cakes and a cup of soup. And by 4 o'clock in the afternoon, they're starving and they're actually back in the pantry and they've given up and on with their day they go. Or maybe they make it 3 or 4 days. But that's what most Americans do. And they wonder why they fail, because their brain has been wired, and it's basically like the electrician came in and cross-wired your brain to want these things, to crave these things. And we have to be able, there are a few people in this world that are just, it's kind of like the guy or girl who smokes and one day they decide they're going to quit smoking and they just, boom, they set it down and walk away. Average person can't do that. You have to have a plan. You have to know what you're doing. The average, actually, I'm gonna take this further. The average physician in the United States does not understand nutrition, and I will gladly and openly tell you that for the first 10 years of my career, I was clueless when it came to nutrition. And everything I told my patients was utterly ridiculous. But it was what I was taught in medical school and what I was taught by other physicians. And nutrition doesn't have to be difficult. It's probably one of my biggest pet peeves. People ask me, what diet do you recommend? And you've heard me say this. I don't recommend diets. I recommend lifestyle changes. What you will eat and what I will eat may be vastly different. My wife will eat anything. I always say she could be like a billy goat. She would eat anything. She doesn't care. I am so freaking picky. And so that's why a lot of diets won't work for me. She always jokes, if it's green, I run the other direction, And so I have to be very particular in how I eat. That's why you just can't say one diet fits all, because we're all different, So you can make a vegan diet extremely healthy. You can make a vegan diet ridiculous. We can make vegan cupcakes, right? So if I eat cupcakes all day long, nobody's ever going to say that's healthy. Let's become a carnivore. If you eat brisket all day long, there's nothing healthy about that diet. Keto. I don't know how many keto recipes I've seen start with 3 cups of cheese. That's ridiculous. So it's about understanding what's good for us and what's not, and then working within that program. If you understand what foods are bad for you, what foods are good for you, staying away from bags and boxes and windows, I think that's one of the biggest keys. If it comes from a bag, a box, or a window, try to stay away from it. This stuff just isn't hard. As Americans, as doctors, we've made this stuff really, really hard when it doesn't have to be hard at all.
I was talking to a buddy last night, because of you, I started doing intermittent fasting years ago. And
sure,
it's like back when I drank alcohol, I would just sip tequila and everybody would be like, oh my God, you're sipping tequila, you're going to die, but it's the same reaction when you talk about intermittent fasting. And it's not really that big a deal once you kind of make it a part of your lifestyle.
Sure. Now sipping tequila is the thing to do, right? You were just ahead of the curve on that. And let's talk alcohol for a second. If we're going to drink alcohol, tequila and vodka, your clear alcohols are going to be your best. And if you can just drink it straight on the rocks or with like a soda, that's actually going to be your best alcohol if we're going to go down the alcohol path. Mm-hmm. But yeah, intermittent fasting is just a great way that we love in our practice to help people with their metabolism, to force their body to burn fat for fuel, to decrease caloric intake, because obviously if you're fasting for a good portion of the day, you're not going to try to make up the food that you missed. And it's a proven fact that we run faster, jump higher, and get sick less, and our brains work better when we fast every day. I have yet to challenge a patient who's ever come back and told me this, and that is I challenge patients to come back in a month and tell me they don't feel better fasting than they did when they didn't fast. Now there's some potential contraindications for some patients that you have to work through, but if it's a healthy thing, then there's no reason why you can't do it. So, I think fasting. So again, there's not one particular way to stay healthy. There's just lots of tricks. You can use the term biohacks if you want to. There's just lots of ways to go about it.
Yeah, one of our listeners here, we're live streaming. What are your opinions on GLP-1s, Dr. Kris?
Well, it's kind of what we've been talking about. We love GLP-1s when used appropriately, when dosed appropriately. I'm going to go on a little bit of a rant for a second. There's a new term that drives me insane. Micro dosing of GLP-1s. Okay, I hear this a lot. It's a social media phrase I blame it on TikTok because that's where I think it first started being seen was I microdose GLP-1s. By the way, that's not me saying it. That's people on TikTok saying it. And I just always say, I don't know what that means. I don't know. Does that mean you're taking tiny doses every day? Does that mean just a tiny dose? We like to deal in doses that we know work. And so we don't use the term microdose in our office. We use the term low dose just because microdose to me sounds like a teeny tiny little dose. So obviously I love GLP-1s. I'm a national speaker on GLP-1s. It's kind of what I'm known for in addition to hormones. I think when used properly, they're amazing for our brains. They're amazing for our bones, our kidneys, our gut, our heart. We're less likely to die of a heart attack or stroke when we're on a GLP-1 versus off a GLP-1. It improves, insulin resistance. It improves our production of insulin. It protects pancreatic function. We've already talked about brain earlier in the podcast and all the positive things that it does for the brain. So, I have a saying in my lectures, and that is that unless budget is the reason, so let's pretend budgets are not restricted, then for the most part, there's rarely an opportunity that I don't think a patient should stay on a GLP-1 long term. It really just comes down to budgetary restraints.
Yeah. So the GLP-1s, that's a peptide, right?
Sure. Yeah. And a peptide is nothing more than chain amino acids that are signaling agents. So they're just, the pure GLP-1 that most of us use is called semaglutide. Tirzepatide is actually a dual receptor agonist. It's a GLP-1 GIP receptor agonist. So it's a 2 receptor agonist, but they're both GLP-1s, but tirzepatide has another receptor that it does. But these peptides work on the brain to decrease appetite, decrease cravings. They work on our pancreas to be more efficient in insulin production. And at the end of the day, we're not as hungry. We don't have as many cravings. We have better metabolism. So ultimately, we lose weight, right? And so that's basically what GLP-1s do in a real thumbnail sketch.
And that's why I think it's like it buys your body time to catch up with the changes that your brain is making, or you're helping your brain have the right perspective on food. And then if you can implement a little intermittent fasting, look at carbs differently, see the value of proteins, hydrate better, add in a little exercise, you've got a full regime now that you have made a very positive change. I think that's one of the other things that it does. Taking control over the way that you have a relationship with food gives your self-esteem a boost.
Sure. Yeah. No. And studies are quite clear on this, that patients feel self-esteem goes up. They feel better. Also, it is, GLP-1s now are being actively used in lots of different addiction disorders. So like nicotine addictions, amphetamines, cocaine, we're alcohol, of course, alcohol use disorder. Great study I present where patients reported less alcohol usage. They drank less frequently. They drank less when they did drink, and less binge drinking episodes whenever patients reported back on semaglutide or tirzepatide. So those are all very positive things. I want to address one rumor that's out there that also just makes me want to stick a stick in my eye, is that GLP-1s make you lose muscle. I've actually heard lots of doctors on social media, that are kind of anti-GLP-1s that pound this opinion into the ground. And I very much disagree with that. And the data that's coming out now is very much showing that this isn't the case. It's the nutrition that you're doing while you're on GLP-1s, or the lack of resistance training while on GLP-1s that makes you lose muscle. So if I just take something, maybe I'll go on an online service and I get semaglutide and it gets mailed to my house, and I don't really know what I'm doing here. And I just notice I'm not as hungry. And so now that I'm not as hungry, I just don't eat as much, but I'm not being protein forward thinking. In other words, I'm not making sure that I'm getting, enough protein in my diet, typically at least 100 grams or more. And I'm losing weight, but oh my gosh, I lost 8 pounds and 4 of that's muscle and 4 of it's fat. Well, now the GLP-1 just got blamed, right? When actually I would tell you that that was the provider and the patient's fault. That was not the GLP-1's fault. And so we actually tell our patients right off the bat, if you consistently lose muscle, I will take you off your GLP-1. I simply won't let you stay on it because you're not following the program. And so we really don't run into that much. I'm not saying that if you lose 50 pounds, you won't lose a little bit of muscle. I'm not trying to be that brash, but I am saying that these patients won't lose significant muscle. And sometimes if we know that like Bill has an excess muscle, I call it over muscled, over fat. In other words, they have a ton of muscle, then I'm not so concerned if I lose 4 or 5 pounds of muscle because we started with 20 pounds of excess. But a lot of these patients, like I said, that skinny fat patient, they're actually under muscled, over fat. Their weight is actually normal, but they're under muscle, over fat. And so you'll have this patient that's 115 pounds, but their body fat's 35%. And they're like, what do you mean? I don't weigh much. I'm like, yeah, but you're carrying a lot of fat and you have basically no muscle. So it's just how to look at patients.
Well, I think this is what really helped me is seeing the diagnostic results really helped me take ownership of the things that I needed to impact to get an overall change. And I think that's the difference in your program, working with you, having ways to measure your success, having more than just a silver bullet. There is no silver bullet. And to have someone that will answer all of the questions that you may have is huge. Otherwise, you're in the dark and you're just guessing. So this program that you offer, what do you call it?
We call it Trim and Fit. So, I mean, it's again, we have different offshoots of it, but we call it Trim and Fit. That's where we start with it. And Trim and Fit is our basic metabolic program that most people will at least start in, and then we can graduate and move into other programs. But also I would even add to what you said is GLP-1s don't always work. And so, knowing how to pivot or why is your GLP-1 not working? We don't want to just throw our hands up in the air and go, well, it didn't work. Sucks for you, see you later, pat you on the head and move on down the road. Because I genuinely do run into patients at times that I truly am. There's always going to be the patient that we're like, yeah, right. I don't really feel like you're really doing what you're telling me you're doing. Mm-hmm. But then there's patients that you're like, no, I really feel comfortable. They're doing what they're supposed to and they're not losing weight. And that's where we got to dig in deeper to what's going on. The good news is most people have success. It's a high success rate. But one of the things that we train other providers on is like what to do next when it doesn't work. We all love to talk about our success stories. We don't always so much like to cover our not so successful stories. But I think that when I talk to doctors, that's what makes us stronger is actually discussing cases that don't seem to go as we hope so we can get new insights. And I learn a ton from other practitioners on just little bitty things that make big differences.
So if I've been listening and I'm like, hey, I'm going to reach out and talk to Dr. Kris and I come in, what's it look like when we get started?
Yeah, so it's a pretty easy process. You either email us or call us, and Lauren or Brenna, one of my staff members, reaches out to you. And typically we start with blood work. We do like to have that blood work before we see you because it really just guides me on where I'm going to take our program with you based on your blood work. So, like, for example, are you insulin resistant? Are you pre-diabetic? These are things that we need to know because we have to tailor the program towards you and also give you realistic timeframes of what it's going to take to get the weight off of you. I think the worst thing that we can do as a provider is give you unrealistic timeframes. If I think it's going to take a year, I'm not afraid to tell you this is going to take a year. And so that's one thing. And then, it's sitting down with myself or one of my providers. We typically, the first visit's an hour, and we really try to get a firm idea of where you're at, what's going on, where we need to go with this, your goals, my goals. hopefully those goals align. And, as I tell patients, a lot of times my patient's goal is to look better. My goal is to make you healthier. The good news is we'll both achieve what we're looking for at the end of the day. And then we just, I tell patients all the time when they come in, then you get to make a decision. That decision can be thanks, but no thanks, or hey, I like part of the plan, but I don't like the whole plan, or like, let's do it all. I typically make more than one recommendation. I typically layer it and I say, we have to do at least this, but we can add B and C to it if we want to. And then, we're very low. We're not a pushy clinic. We let our patients decide what they want to do. We want to make sure they're comfortable. Many times our patients will go home and think about it for the night and call us back on Monday because, we want them to be comfortable. We want them as a customer for the long term, not just for a month or two.
Are hormones sometimes in play?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, we always check hormones on any of our patients that are in that age range. And if you are hormonally imbalanced, balancing your hormones, in my opinion, is critical. I'm always going to be a hormone forward doctor, because just think about, we go back to metabolism, and one of the biggest negative impacts on metabolism can be like menopause. And so if we're choosing not to correct the menopause, well, we're really losing the ability to have your body work for you, not against you. And there's a lot of patients, especially my guys, you fix their testosterone and they lose the weight all on their own. And they're like, hey, doc, can you give me 2 months to do this on my own? I'm like, sure, that's fine. If you don't lose it in 2 months, then we'll start plan B. Maybe plan A is just testosterone. So yeah, just hormone replacement is always, that's what I've been doing the longest in this industry, and what I absolutely firmly believe is so important. And as the analogy I've used with you many times, you don't build $1 million houses on dirt. You build them on foundations, and hormones are the foundation of every good metabolic program, in my opinion.
Yeah. Yeah, I think folks, they have if they're trying to take control of their health, they have a trainer or something, but to have your input gives them a more info than your trainers has available, right? And we
want to work with that trainer too. I always say if it's a good trainer, they don't get offended by what we're saying. I always say if the trainer, because I get that asked, like, what if my trainer gets upset? And I'm like, well, then you might need a new trainer, in my opinion, because they're not forward thinking. These are not like Dr. Kris's stuff I came up with. This is science, and science is hard to argue with. We've got the studies to back up what we do in our practice. And like I said, most of the time with exercise, I actually want you to work out less hard than what you're used to actually burn more fat. And so that's what's really cool about what we talk about is with these little tests. Now we can tell you exactly, give you the blueprint to take back to your trainer if you have one. And if you don't have one, feeling comfortable of actually doing in your gym what needs to be done to get the fat burned off, if that's the goal.
Awesome. All right. So the website is theresurgeclinic.com. That's where you can reach out and set up a time and get an appointment with Dr. Kris. Anything else you want to add to that?
No, it's just, this is, I know we're a little bit into 2025, and I'm not necessarily a big New Year's resolution kind of guy, but I think that the first quarter is a nice time with summer coming, that let's get in shape so that I can be happy about your health and you can be happy how you look in your swimsuit or bikini and go on those summer trips. And so I just think this is always a good time to start getting at it. After it, kind of in that March, April timeframe, gives us 2 or 3 months to really work on getting in tip-top shape.
All right, Dr. Kris, good conversation always. Lots of things around this. We could talk for hours about it. I'm going to do the outro. Good job. You folks reach out to the Resurge Clinic, set a time, and start taking control of your journey in your health and how you're feeling. And maybe you can sit in that bathtub when you're.
Yeah, that's a small bathtub too.
All right. Thanks for joining the Dr. Kris Podcast. If you learned something today and you want to connect and get more information, visit our website, www.drkris.life, where you can find more great information, or even schedule a time to learn how you can engage with Dr. Kris. Be sure to follow, like, share, and we'll see you on the next episode of the Dr. Kris Podcast.